a more stable, less insecure. Donald Trump is in this for himself, and he's going to have a rude awakening in November.
Malcolm Kenyatta from the great state of Pennsylvania, thank you so much for being with us. Pennsylvania State House Representative, member of the Biden-Harris campaign's National Advisory Board. And that is our show for tonight. You can catch me this weekend on my regular show, The Weekend, at 8 a.m. Eastern, Saturdays and Sundays. I need to go to bed right now. Our guest tomorrow, Maryland Governor and rising Democratic star, Wes Moore. Now is the time for the last word with Ali Velshi in for Lawrence. Good morning, Ali, the other person who needs to be up bright and early tomorrow.
I got a lot of surprises tonight. I walk in, I see you on TV. I come in to say hello to you, and I run into Malcolm Kenyatta, who's a fellow Pennsylvanian, and it was great to see him. And you know, if the campaign has people like him talking about what people are actually feeling out there, I think that's going to be very, very helpful. You can give people statistics, you can give people all sorts of stuff, but we have to have real conversations about how are these things affecting you at home. So I thought a lot of surprises for me, a lot of fun in one hallway running into two of my old friends. I'm going to see you in not too many hours.
We're going to do this all over again. Have a great night.
Get some sleep, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we got a surprise from the Supreme Court today, a ruling in favor of common sense. All the justices except Clarence Thomas joined in favor of a common sense decision in the case of preventing domestic abusers from having guns. Chief Justice Roberts, in the majority opinion, wrote, quote, "The laws confirm what common sense suggests. When an individual poses a clear threat of physical violence to another, the threatening individual may be disarmed," end quote. When an individual poses a clear threat, that threatening individual may be disarmed. It's a good concept. Does it apply to this individual?
Those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened. All they were doing is protesting a rigged election.
The Supreme Court again today said nothing about that individual. He's not trying to buy a gun. He's trying to get complete immunity for the effort to overthrow the election that culminated in the violent attack on the Capitol on January the 6th. He's calling the convicted attackers his warriors, victims. Those are the people who beat police officers, hunted members of Congress, threatened to hang the vice president. He's repeating the lie that the election he lost was rigged. He has not been deterred in the least. He's doubling down. Trump is saying that he will pardon these criminals, offering them immunity and possibly the opportunity to do it again. And the court said nothing on that today. Even though it's been 6 months since Special Prosecutor Jack Smith asked for expedited consideration of this matter, 4 months since a federal appeals court panel unanimously ruled that Trump should be disarmed by simply making him subject to the law like everyone else in this country. In the meantime, Donald Trump has been convicted by a jury of 34 felonies related to his effort to influence the 2016 election. And still, the Supreme Court is effectively immunizing Trump by helping him rout the clock on federal prosecution. Trump today is worse than he was in 2016 or in 2020. And he and the country will be worse if he is returned to the presidency. To protect democracy, America must defeat Trumpism. If Trump is able to come back from inciting an insurrection, the message will be that lawlessness wins, criminality wins, fraud wins, sexual assault wins, overthrowing the will of the voters wins. Threatening to assassinate the vice president for upholding the Constitution wins. Beating police officers wins. Threatening judges and prosecutors and juries wins. If Trumpism wins, the candidate who comes after Trump will be worse, because they won't be pretending like some Republican senators who are cowards, but know exactly who Trump is.
This is now multiple rallies where people are assaulted and beat up, where a guy gets sucker punched by one of the Trump supporters, and then instead of condemning it, Trump is silent. When the guy is released from jail, he says the next time maybe we should kill the protester. Again, there's silence. Then he goes on stage and makes things up. He keeps telling the story about a general who dipped bullets into pig blood and shot a bunch of prisoners, Muslim prisoners. Not only is it outrageous, it's a lie. He has said to people, why don't we basically beat up the protesters and beat up the hecklers and I'll pay your legal bills. Now, here's what people have to understand. Maybe you think it's a joke, but there are people out there that are not balanced. There are people out there that are not completely in control of themselves. And they hear something like this from a leader, you don't know what they're going to do next. And when someone is seeking a position of leadership and is already in a position of influence, you speak responsibly. This notion that a president can just say anything they want, or even a presidential candidate can say anything they want, whatever comes to mind, it's just not true, and it's reckless, and it's dangerous.
Pretty refreshing. You're not going to hear that anymore, as Marco Rubio is on the short list to be a vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump. But that's exactly what happened, except instead of Trump paying those protesters legal bills, his supporters pay his legal bills now. Trump's lies and attacks have led to death threats. Today in Florida, the Trump appointee, Judge Aileen Cannon, is holding a hearing on a Trump motion arguing that Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's appointment itself was unconstitutional. Never mind that this is just a flimsy attempt that has failed before. In Judge Cannon's courtroom, every Trump objection is infinitely more important than voters learning through a criminal trial whether the former president stole classified documents, left them fully accessible to bad actors at his golf club, and what lengths he went to stop the government from getting those documents back. You cannot have a successful democracy when the governing vision of one of the two parties is Trumpism.
A lot of Republican politicians have surrendered to it. Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. I feel no need to kiss the ring. I have no fear of Trump's retribution. I'm not.
That was a great speech. She spoke truth to power. And you know what happened next? She said she's voting for Trump. But did you hear those cheers? That was Republican voters cheering the words, "I have no fear of Trump." Trump lost 16% of the vote in the Republican primary in Pennsylvania, 18% of the vote in the Republican primary in Arizona, 20% of the vote in the Republican primary in Wisconsin. All of those elections, all of those primaries were held after Nikki Haley dropped out. So even when there isn't somebody running against him, he's losing those numbers. Those voters weren't voting for Haley. They were voting for a better, saner party, Republicanism without Trumpism, voting for what I like to call Myrna, make Republicans normal again. Myrna. I don't know if the Republican Party will become better if Trump loses, but I know our democracy will absolutely be worse if he wins. People in a functioning, healthy democracy are not forced to wait on tenterhooks, wondering, today, will democracy hold? Or will the Supreme Court give the guy who lost by 7 million votes a free pass for his coup? As former Attorney General Eric Holder put it, there is no cavalry coming. You are it. It's up to the voters to show that Trumpism is a loser and democracy will ultimately win. And honestly, is it really so hard to stand up to this?
So there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted, or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner. Joe Biden's granting mass thing.
Joining us now, Tom Nichols. He's a former professor at the U.S. Naval War College. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic, where he's author of the Atlantic Daily Newsletter. Jennifer Rubin, Washington Post opinion columnist and an MSNBC political analyst. Good evening, friends. Where to start, Tom Nichols? Where to start with Donald Trump? It does have to end. For people who are conservatives, and there are many in this country, they need a future. They need someone to vote for. They need ideas to debate. None of this is going to happen until Donald Trump is out of the way. And not just Donald Trump, but this whole concept that he has brought to life in America.
Well, there's really three groups when you talk about Republicans. One is the Donald Trump base, the cult that is now the base of the Republican Party. Then there are the Republican electeds who are just at this point cowardly opportunists, people who have no reason not to speak out against Trump, still somehow think they're going to be, movers and shakers in some better world that's just around the corner. But then there's a third group of, normal, patriotic American conservatives, right, people who are right of center, who disagree with people on the left, who really have nowhere to go. But they're a small group, and they're trapped in between a cult that couldn't care less about right or left or up or down, and care only about this reality show that they're watching. And they're trapped by Republican electeds like Nikki Haley and Marco Rubio, who talk about how Trump is completely unfit for office, but is now, a guy they just have to vote for. And so they have nowhere to go. So I don't think that short of multiple electoral wipeouts that take not just Trump, but these other really, spineless politicians out of office, I don't think that there's much hope in the near term.
Jennifer, it's a strange situation where we have 340 plus million people, but the president is going to choose, the presidential candidate, Donald Trump, is going to choose a vice presidential candidate from a pool of people who have been harshly critical of him in the past, some of them in the near past, either Doug Burgum or J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, as we're reporting today. What do you make of this? What do you make of whether any of them are going to be useful to Donald Trump, given the circumstances we're talking about?
Well, these are the spineless of the spineless. They have clawed their way up to be the creme de la creme of sycophants. So that's why they're in the VP race. And the fact that in the past they may have said critical things, but they have now capitulated in Donald Trump's twisted mind makes them even better because they have bent to his will. And these people, I think, know better. I know that Marco Rubio knows better. Marco Rubio used to be in favor of immigration reform. He used to speak critically of Trump. He used to be a hawk. He apparently is willing to shove all that aside just for the pleasure of being the next guy that Trump would call the mob out to assassinate if it need be. So I think they are the perfect example, whether you call them enablers or you call them sycophants, it's all the same. They make Trump possible because they don't stand up to him and they don't offer an alternative to voters. But I think Tom just said something really important. It's not going to be enough for one election, right, because if and when, I pray, Trump loses,